I still remember the way their words cut into me that evening. It wasn't the first time my family had laughed at me, but somehow, that night, the sting was sharper. We were all seated in the living room, my uncles, aunts, cousins, and of course my parents. The discussion, as always, revolved around investments, business ventures, and the family's financial future. "Don't even bother asking him," my uncle chuckled, gesturing at me. "He's terrible with money. Can't save a dime, can't think long term. If we let him handle anything, we'd be bankrupt in a month." Laughter erupted around the room. My cousins smirked. My aunt shook her head dramatically, and my mother, she stayed silent, eyes lowered, as if she too believed their words. I wanted to speak, to defend myself, but every time I tried, someone cut me off. "Maybe you should focus on your little hobbies," another cousin sneered. "Leave the serious matters to people who understand finances." Their words burned into me. They weren't just teasing, they were dismissing me, pushing me into a corner where I had no voice, no value. In their eyes, I was irresponsible, naive, incapable of ever understanding money. What hurt most wasn't just the mockery. It was the fact that they had never even given me a chance. No one had asked what I knew or what I wanted to learn. They had simply decided I was the black sheep, the financial fool, the one who could never be trusted with responsibility. That night, as they passed around investment papers and balance sheets, I sat quietly in the corner. I wasn't invited to look at anything. I wasn't asked for input. My presence was almost irrelevant. Inside me, something shifted. At first, it was just pain, a heavy ache that settled in my chest, a feeling of being unwanted in the very family I loved. But slowly, quietly, that pain hardened into something else resolve. I told myself, "Fine, you think I'm bad with money. You think I'll never understand investments. Then I'll learn, I'll study, I'll build myself in silence. And one day I'll prove you all wrong." That night, when everyone else laughed and moved on, I went to my room and sat staring at the ceiling. I remembered every sneer, every chuckle, every dismissive glance. They thought I would forget, that their words would fade. But betrayal doesn't fade. It plants itself deep in your heart like a seed, and given enough time it grows. And mine had just begun to take root. After that humiliating evening, my life took a turn that no one in my family noticed. On the surface, I remained the same quiet presence they had always ignored. At family gatherings, I sat in the corner, listening as they discussed stock prices, real estate, and investment strategies. They didn't bother asking me to join the conversation, and I didn't bother forcing myself into it. But when I went home, everything changed. I started to devour books on finance. At first, the words looked like a foreign language: equity, dividends, asset allocation, market volatility. My head spun, but I refused to quit. Night after night, I read. My room became a library of personal finance guides, investment strategies, and biographies of self-made millionaires. During the day, I worked odd jobs, earning just enough to survive. But at night, I built a different kind of wealth knowledge. While my family mocked me for not contributing to their serious discussions, I was secretly learning the art of money. I studied charts, followed market trends, and even opened small trading accounts with what little savings I had. Sometimes I lost money, sometimes I gained, but each mistake carved a lesson into my memory. It wasn't just about getting rich. It was about understanding, about arming myself with the very skill they said I would never master. Years passed. My cousins flaunted their flashy cars, their branded clothes, their shallow luxuries funded by family wealth. I stayed quiet, appearing ordinary. They laughed at my modest lifestyle, never realizing that behind my silence was a storm. Every insult, every time they said, "You'll never understand money," I stored it deep inside me like fuel. And with each passing year, my flame grew hotter. Then came the cracks in their empire. One uncle invested poorly in a risky business venture. Another cousin over-leveraged on loans. The family started to argue, blaming each other for financial missteps. For the first time, I saw fear in their eyes when the word loss entered the room, but still, none of them looked at me. They couldn't imagine that the one they had called useless all his life had been preparing for this very moment. And so I waited, patient, silent, invisible, because revenge is not served in anger. Revenge is served in silence, built over years, hidden beneath humility. I told myself, one day they will come to me not with laughter, not with mockery, but with desperation. And that day, I'll hold all the power they once denied me, and when that day came, they wouldn't even see it until it was too late. It happened sooner than I expected. The cracks in the family's financial empire widened until they became chasms. A failed real estate deal, a cousin who had gambled too much in the stock market, an uncle who borrowed heavily but had no way to pay back. The family wealth, once a source of pride and arrogance, was slipping through their fingers like sand. I watched silently, never once offering unsolicited advice, but I saw the fear, the late-night meetings, the rising voices echoing through the house. They were desperate, and then it came. One evening, my father called me into the living room, the same room where years ago they had laughed at me, humiliated me, dismissed me. This time the laughter was gone. The room was heavy, tense. "We need help," he said, his voice tight. My uncle added quickly, "You're good with numbers, right? Maybe you can look at our accounts. Just, to organize things." I almost smiled, but I kept my face calm. They thought they were offering me a small role. They had no idea what I had become in the years they ignored me. "Of course," I said quietly, "I'll see what I can do." And so, the keys to their financial world landed in my hands, almost too easily. I began with small steps, reviewing their investment portfolios, rebalancing accounts, cutting unnecessary losses. At first, they were skeptical, hovering over me second, guessing my decisions. But when they saw small improvements, tiny profits where there had only been losses, they relaxed. "Maybe he does know a thing or two," my uncle muttered once. Week by week, I pulled more threads. Slowly, their dependence on me grew. I was the one who tracked their investments, the one who explained which stocks to sell, which funds to hold, which properties to keep. Without even realizing it, they had surrendered control. Soon, every financial decision passed through me. They couldn't move a single dollar without my guidance. They signed where I told them to sign. They trusted me with access to accounts, portfolios, even legal documents. The same family that once said, "You're terrible with money," now couldn't breathe financially without me. And yet they still didn't see it. They thought I was saving them. They thought I was their safety net. They didn't realize I was the one weaving the web, and they were caught in it. At night, when I sat alone reviewing their accounts, I felt a strange mix of emotions. There was satisfaction, of course, but also a deep ache, the memory of every insult, every dismissal. I whispered to myself, "You mocked me, you shut me out, but now your entire empire rests in my hands. You belong to me." For the first time in my life, I was not the invisible one. I was not the fool in the corner. I was the quiet master of their future, and I knew exactly what I would do next. It didn't happen overnight. For months, I controlled their portfolio, as if I were simply managing it. On the outside, everything looked calm. My family still acted proud, still put on their airs when out in public, but inside I knew the truth. Without me, they were powerless. I could have ruined them instantly, but I didn't. That wasn't the point. Revenge, if it is to be truly sweet, must unfold like a slow, inevitable dawn. I started by consolidating all their accounts for easier management. I told them. I shifted their assets into structures where I was the sole signatory. Purely administrative. I reassured them. They signed papers they didn't read, trusting the son, nephew, cousin they had once mocked. They never saw how their independence vanished, one signature at a time, and then, at last, the day arrived. We were all gathered once more in that same living room, the same room where they had laughed at me years ago. Only now the laughter was gone. Their eyes were worried, darting between one another, waiting for me to speak. I laid out the documents, calm and deliberate. Here, I said, sliding a paper across the table. This shows where your investments stand. Every property, every stock, every bond consolidated under one portfolio. They stared at the numbers, confused. But why is your name listed as the controlling manager? My uncle asked, his voice trembling. Because, I replied softly, you gave me control every step of the way. You signed every paper, you handed me everything. Silence fell like a stone. You're joking, one cousin muttered. My father's face had gone pale. Son, what are you saying? I leaned back, meeting each pair of eyes, my voice calm but unshakable. I'm saying the person you called bad with money, the one you excluded, humiliated, ignored, now controls every cent of your wealth. Your investments, your future, all of it. You trusted me because you had no choice, and now you live by my choices. No one spoke. The weight of my words crushed the room. I didn't shout. I didn't gloat. I didn't even smile. I simply let the truth hang there, heavy and undeniable. For a long moment, all I could hear was the echo of my own heartbeat. And then, finally, I stood. I'm not going to ruin you, I said quietly. That would be easy. But from now on, things will be different. You will listen when I speak. You will respect me when I give advice. You will never again treat me as a fool. I gathered the papers into a folder. You said I was bad with money. I whispered, almost to myself. And yet here I am holding your entire life in my hands. As I walked out of the room, I felt no rage, no joy, just a strange, quiet peace, the kind of peace that comes when a wound finally closes. They had called me useless. They had betrayed my loyalty, my dignity. But in the end, I had not only learned the game, they had handed me the board. And that was the sweetest revenge of all.